Dear colleagues, it is an honour for the European Parliament to have the President of Slovakia, Zuzana Čaputová, with us here today. Madam President, dear Zuzana, welcome. Thank you for your vocal promotion of the values of equality and diversity that this House and our Europe holds so dear. Last week's double murder at the heart of Bratislava is a reminder to us of the constant need to fight back against hate and defend our LGBTIQ community. President Čaputová, we know you also as a firm defender of freedom of speech. Soon we will mark 5 years since the murder of Slovak journalists Jan Kuciak and Martina Kušnirova that shocked us to our core. This House, Madam President, will always remember Jan and Martina, and you will always find us as an ally in the defence of values. Dear Zuzana, let me quote your words in a speech that you gave at the United Nations General Assembly. You said that solidarity should be our binding principle, not an option. And your country, Slovakia, has demonstrated what solidarity means by welcoming more than 500,000 Ukrainian refugees since the onset of war, by being at the forefront of political and military aid to Ukraine. Slovakia has shown time and again that it can lead. Thank you for your country's leadership at this critical moment for Europe. President Čaputová, the floor is yours.
Madam President, honourable members, dear representatives of the Czech Presidency of the Council, my fellow Europeans. It's an honour and privilege to be here and to address the beating heart of the European Union's democracy here in Strasbourg. This is a city where the modern concept of defending universal human rights was translated into concrete institutions. While serving a broader purpose, I see the European Parliament as one of them. My message today is simple. If we don't start defending democracy, it will cease to exist. The date of my speech here was planned long ago. I couldn't have expected that the recent homophobic murder of Juraj Vankulić and Matúš Horváth on the streets of Bratislava would remind us of this simple truth so painfully. It's hard to put in words the grief felt in Slovakia's cities in the past few days, because hate decided to kill love, just because the killer could not accept that love can come in different forms. This was an assault not just on young people from the LGBTIQ community. It was an attack on everyone in Slovakia, because hate crimes always target the very essence of what our society stands for. I would like to assure you that hatred doesn't dominate our society. I welcome that Slovakia's civil society immediately and resolutely condemned this attack. Just yesterday, the Slovak Parliament adopted a resolution strongly condemning this terrorist act and ensuring all minorities that they are valuable members of our society. In its essence, democracy is the rule by the majority in the interest of all, with a key emphasis on the protection of minorities. If we are failing in their protection, we are undermining democracy itself. In my view, the defence and protection of democracy is the core mission of our generation of political leaders. The task ahead of us is to bring Europe back into balance, which is shaken by crises from within and without. A balance between our rights and our commitments, between our security and our prosperity, which we have partly built through dependence on those who wish to destroy our democracy. A balance in which we can have different opinions, but where we are bound by the values of freedom, solidarity, and liberal democracy. And now, please allow me to switch into Slovak, so even here, into European Parliament's chamber, one can hear the beautiful Slovak language. Vážená pani prezidentka.
Madam President, honourable members, the balance that I've mentioned has been threatened in the past 2 years by two major crises, the pandemic and the security crisis caused by Russia by invading Ukraine. As a European Union, we reacted the right way to both crises. In the pandemic, the national closing of borders and the race who would procure more face masks were quickly replaced by a common approach and solidarity. We started to recover our economy post-pandemic with the help of the resilience and recovery facility, and solidarity is shared also beyond our borders. We are today one of the biggest global donors of vaccines against COVID-19, and equally decisively have we reacted to the war that Vladimir Putin waged on the 24th of February against our eastern neighbour. Let us remember that this war only intensified on this gloomy February morning, that Russia waged this war long before, first by disinformation and propaganda, and since 2014 also in military way, with the clear goal to subjugate Ukraine or to destroy it. We have imposed the most extensive sanctions as the European Union against Russia, sanctions that have never been this extensive against any developed economy. We provide political, financial, humanitarian, and most of the countries, including Slovakia, also military aid to Ukraine. Very important is the European perspective that we offer to Ukraine, and I'm convinced that one day it will culminate in a full-fledged membership. With our aid, we have one goal: to achieve peace. However, peace has to be just. Otherwise, it would only be a temporary ceasefire. We have opened not only our homes, but also our hearts to those who had to flee war. Some 800,000 people crossed just the Slovak-Ukrainian border, and many of those remained in our country. And I'm very proud of the solidarity and aid that was offered by our citizens. Both crises left the Europeans not only with fear and worries, but also with the experience of a very strong Europe-wide empathy and unity. And this experience shows us that the best way to overcome any challenges that we face as a union is our unity, cooperation, and solidarity. Ladies and gentlemen, our efforts to restore the balance in Europe do not stop here. It is paradoxical that in a situation where we are unprecedentedly united against external challenges, we also face very strong internal pressures. They are caused by a confluence of several crises, but also by ignoring our vulnerabilities for a long time. If we do not cope with these European crises, we run the risk that they will grow into a crisis of Europe. Millions of European households and companies are threatened by skyrocketing energy prices today. These prices began to rise even before the war, since Russia has already begun to reduce gas supplies to Europe already last summer, and it started thus to distort the European energy market and threaten our citizens. Slovakia, which until recently had 85% of its gas from Russia, managed to reduce its dependency to 33% thanks to diversification. However, we never know when Vladimir Putin stops gas supplies for good. As a union, we have to address the causes and the impacts of this crisis. The right solutions, therefore, have to be European, common, and in solidarity. Those that will urgently help all in a difficult situation, all member states, and apart from compensations will allow an agreement on a common gap on gas prices. We need to decouple the prices of electricity and gas because even today countries such as Slovakia, generating most of its electricity from low carbon sources, pay inadequately high prices for it, and therefore I would like to ask you to support such solutions. However, apart from the consequences, we have to address the causes that brought us here. Never again may we remain on one supplier as a union, and never again may our economic model and prosperity depend on fossil fuels alone. The commitment to become a climate-neutral continent by 2050 can no longer be delayed or put in question. First and foremost, we have to help those who are hit the hardest by the energy crisis. But the goal is clear. We need to innovate our development model in order to use renewable energy sources to a greater extent and destroy our own planet less. We must become a global leader not only in our climate commitments or ambitions, but also in implementing them. We will only survive if we restore the balance between our way of life and the planet where we live. Honourable members, today we face a crisis of democratic rules and their respect. Each country that joined the European Union and each country that wishes to join has to be and has to remain a liberal democracy. Being a member of this club is not an entitlement, it's a privilege. It is not enough to achieve membership in this club. The membership has to be constantly updated with a clear understanding and respect of common values. Values such as the rule of law, division of power, independence of the judiciary, freedom of the media, or protection of minorities. If these cornerstones on which our community is built are under attack, we have to act to protect them. I want to emphasize that we do not lack the rules as much as we lack the consistency in enforcing them. If our measures are not decisive, problems will grow, and those who violate the values of the European Union will encourage and inspire others. The very notion of liberal democracy is being misinterpreted, misunderstood, questioned and attacked by the extremes in many of our countries. Even though there is not a single model of liberal democracy, I am certain that illiberal democracy are two incompatible notions. Honourable members, our democratic rules are today abused to destroy democracy itself. Freedom of speech is one of the most important democratic rights. We need to protect it, but it's not without limitations. How could it happen that we let freedom of speech escalate to verbal crimes? How could we elevate it many times to an absolute right? This is not democratic, this is stupid. The freedom of speech cannot be a cover to spread intolerance, lies and disinformation. Nowhere is this problem more acute than in social networks. The radicalized teenager that killed 2 young men last week and injured a 3rd person in the streets of Bratislava was greatly inspired on social media. And before the murder, he published a long pamphlet on social network full of hatred against various minorities. This murder did happen in Slovakia, but the risk of such crimes concerns all of us. We witness a growing aggression against minorities and a growing right-wing extremism in many parts of Europe. The worsening of the socio-economic situation only enhances the confidence of radicals. We need to be aware that any attack based on hatred is an attack against the very values of the European Union that include equality, tolerance and respect of human rights. It seems that we take a similarly naive approach to social network as we take to other technological innovations, without due caution. We use the benefits without knowledge and vigilance of their potential and obvious negative consequences. We use social networks without being fully aware as a society how their algorithms may harm us, how they deepen the polarization and enhance filter bubbles. To believe the truth, to live the truth, and to defend the truth is the motto of one of the founders of the modern Slovak nation, General Milan Rastislav Štefánik. In public space, it has to apply even when it seems that it would be more efficient to shout loudly, regardless of the quality or truthfulness of the statement, instead of listening to each other, engaging in dialogue, and caring for facts. Let us not let democracy perish on the naivety of Democrats, on the naive belief that democratic rights and freedoms will only be used and never abused. Let us not forget that every right is at the same time an expression of responsibility and vice versa. And if we do not protect democracy, it may happen that we will be the last generation to experience it. Its protection is the main task of our generation of political leaders. Therefore, we have to take appropriate steps in this area at national level. It is good that the European Parliament adopted the Digital Services Act, and I also welcome the European Democracy Action Plan. What is illegal offline has to be illegal online.
However, we need to also do more at the global level. The business model of social platforms is based on the use of the lowest human emotions and impulses. Social platforms are not just operators of the proverbial information pipelines, because their profit is directly proportional to how much hatred, how much aggression, lies, and disinformation flows through these pipelines. They must therefore bear reasonable responsibility for the content that is published on them. Madam President, honourable members, the challenges I'm talking about today make the European Union more fragile than we may realise and admit. The economic, security and energy crisis, the ongoing fragmentation of our societies and the pressure of illegal migration, these are all breeding grounds for extremism. In many member countries of the Union, one election cycle is enough today, and in the parliamentary benches, even here in this House, in your seats, there can be a majority that does not want to build Europe, but destroy it. Therefore, we must not be naive, we must not be lax and defensive, but on the contrary, we must be persistent, courageous and self-confident in the defence of our common values. Despite the inevitability of solving many crises, and perhaps precisely because of it, we must not forget that the performance of politics, as such, should be based on very clear values. That is, on the value that we have to defend as politicians. If we believe and stay true to these principles, this will not be a show of weakness, but the contrary. The first president of Czechoslovakia, Tomáš Garrigue Masaryk, already said 100 years ago that democracy is not only a political system, but first and foremost is a moral system. Let's all think about it when carrying out our mandate, which is a responsibility and an obligation towards our citizens. If we perceive democracy in this sense, I am sure that we will manage the crisis we are facing today and thus fulfill our mission to be the guardians and protectors of democracy, of European values and of the balance. Thank you.
Finish.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That concludes the formal sitting, and we thereby resume our sitting with the votes. I will give 1 minute for you to find your seats and place your voting cards.